So when I hear the word media, my first thought is newspapers, but of course it's much, much broader than that. And the influences that we have, newspapers is a tiny, I don't think it would even make up 1% of the fragment of what young people are exposed to today. We're talking about film and television, and everything that bleeds out of that. Advertising, music videos is huge. I remember one Black American woman saying some time ago that she felt her community, the females of her community, were just treated as, and the phrase she used was, a bunch of butts walking around. And that's what she was saying young black girls are growing up looking at on MTV, and the way that they're so thoroughly objectified. And I think in many different ways, women everywhere are receiving different forms of that same message. And we don't even know, this is the reality when we're young girls growing up, we don't even know that it's toxic messaging that we're listening to. We don't know that, you know. I had actually already started out speaking publicly to the issue of prostitution before I remembered something that was just kind of shocking to me, because sometimes things will come back to you and, you know, will it just as politicized as you think you are, it will have slipped right off your head. And that thing was this, I was walking down to the red light zone the very first day I got into prostitution, and my boyfriend, I would have told you he was at the time, who was in fact my pimp, was of course walking alongside me, and he was bringing me where we were about to go. And I remember in my mind, for some reason, and this wasn't like, I didn't deliberately conjure up this image, it just popped into my head. And I was thinking about Madonna in that Desperately Seeking Susan film that came out back in the late 80s. And I was thinking, you know, my mind was all fishnets and shiny black patent leather and fire engine red lipstick, and what I had absorbed as the message of what a sexually empowered young woman looked like. So you see, my mind made that link between what I had been fed and what I was about to do. And I think it's very revealing that I started thinking about that at that particular place and time. So I think, you know, when there's got to be some kind of standards here. I mean, if you look at anything else that we consume, no matter what it is, I mean, there'll be a salt warning on food, you know, if there's a ridiculously high amount of salt in it. Your alcohol, your cigarettes, anything that has any kind of toxicity attached to it will have a warning on it. But I wonder, where are the standards in film and television and other forms of media that are influencing young minds? Since I started speaking out about prostitution, I was really, shocked is not the word, you know, the truth is I wasn't remotely surprised, but I was really saddened and kind of stunned by the amount of young women who contacted me to tell me the reasons that they got involved in prostitution. And in Western Europe, where I'm from, there was a very popular television show about 10 years or so back, and it was based on a blog that had been called Secret Diary of a London Call Girl. And the amount of young women who contacted me to tell me that they had absorbed the message through that TV show, that prostitution was very glamorous, very, very well paid, that it was all about hotel rooms and very expensive restaurants, and that basically a package had been sold to them that involved Christian Louboutin shoes and all of the different markers of luxury, you know, the things that would speak to us of luxury in this society. And I'll never forget one particular young woman. She was a French girl, and for some reason she broke my heart worst of all. There was just something so very fragile and vulnerable in her nature and how she presented herself. She'd been 6 months in prostitution, and she got into prostitution directly, absolutely, because of that TV show. She told me this over a Skype call one evening, and there's the evidence, you know. It's just the evidence that what we allow to be injected out into the social environment around us has a direct impact, a boomerang straight back, and impacts young lives. And another film would have been The People versus Larry Flint. I watched that film, and I you know, and this is not, you know, a confession I enjoy making in public, especially not on camera. But when I watched that People versus Larry Flint, there was, I don't know what happened there. There was a kind of an aura around it. The way that the film was put together, it was like poor, hard done, put upon Larry Flint, you know, and he was just being hounded by the authorities, and he was only just trying to make a buck, and he was very good at what he did. And you actually felt sympathetic for Larry Flint. I did, you know. Now the reality of the real world Larry Flint was, I would perceive that man to be a monster and a scumbag and a whole lot more besides. But watching that film and how the pieces of it were put together and how it was very entertaining, and I can't remember the score, I probably enjoyed the music, but the whole thing combined to create a package that I found very entertaining, and I like being entertained. But years afterwards, I was thinking back, and I was thinking through all these issues, and I was thinking about, you know, media and media representations. And I was thinking, I cannot believe that me of all people was sucked into enjoying The People versus Larry Flint. But if somebody who's lived this reality and been brutalised as many times as I have can enjoy a film like that, anybody can. And I think that it's something that really speaks to the power of media representations and misrepresentations, because they're doing a whole world of damage. And I mean, so much so that you can't even, like, speaking to young people today, I'm in my early 40s, but the gulf between women in their early 40s and women in their early 20s, unless they've lived similar experiences as Melanie has, is absolutely enormous, to the point where you can barely even have a conversation. They've no idea, a lot of them, what it is that's being projected into their minds. One thing as well that I really encourage people to do is to look critically, learn to look critically at every image you see. And that will really leave you in a state of eye-popping surprise. I was walking by one of my local pharmacies recently, and there was an image of a woman with her plain white shirt on, but open to below her navel, right? And you could only see the upper half of her body. So she's got a white shirt on, it's almost all the way open, she's got no bra on, and she's trying to sell me a lipstick. You know, and I'm thinking, like, you know, now that I've been doing it for years now, critically just examining these images as I see them. And once you start doing that, you'll notice that they are everywhere. And not only are they everywhere, but they vastly outnumber the images that are not, would be considered provocative. And that's another word that I've started to interrogate, by the way, because I've started to think about, well, provoking what? Because provocative means to provoke, right? So what are we really provoking here with this imagery? You know, like, you can go deep into this subject, and I think we really should.